So I've always thought that Frankie looked like a lifeguard, but what's interesting about this is that he also has a lot of very interesting parallels with Senor Pink, the man he fights during the Dressrosa arc. But we have to go back to Ennis Lobby for a second. In chapter 404, Frankie is fighting Funkuro, and he needs a refill on his cola in order to power him up. Chopper at the time passes him a bunch of various drinks that are not cola, and they have interesting effects on his physiology once he puts them inside his weird fridge gut. When he is fed vegetable juice, his hair transforms into the shape of a tomato, which is very interesting. Later on in his premiere fight against Funkuro, he has to actually swim. So that's very funny. The lifeguard looking character actually has to swim, but he has to swim in order to save himself because he is about to fall within the depths of Ennis Lobby. So he performs a technique called Frankie Butterfly, which is a butterfly stroke named after himself in order to catch up with Funkuro. Later on in Dressrosa, we are introduced to a character called Senor Pink. Senor Pink visually has some very interesting parallels with Frankie, as instead of a Speedo, he wears a Mawashi, which is something that sumo wrestlers wear. On top of that, of course, he wears sunglasses. But the interesting thing, too, is that in chapter 732, we see him eat a tomato. So it's funny that he's eating a tomato, and Frankie's hair once did transform into a tomato. And at this point in the story, he can do that freely if he wanted, because if you press on his nose, his hair transforms. But continuing on, it's also very interesting that a technique in which Frankie used to save himself, which is Frankie Butterfly, which again is just him performing the butterfly stroke, is something that would end up being the primary ability of Senor Pink, because as you know, Senor Pink has the swim fruit, which allows him to swim through matter as if it were water. And he has a weird effect on surfaces because they act exactly like water when he's making contact with them. But continuing off of that, way later in the anime in which Devil Fruits are being explained by Vegapunk, in the shot, we see many fruits. We see the Chop fruit. We see the Ox fruits, model giraffe and bison. And then we see Yamato's fruit, Kaido's fruit, and Lushi's fruit. But there are two unidentified fruits in this shot. One seems to be some sort of purple fruit, and the other is a pink fruit. Said pink fruit looks like a very oddly shaped tomato. So, given that Vegapunk has experimented with Senor Pink's lineage factor in order to give the Seraphim S Shark the abilities of the Swim fruit, it wouldn't surprise me that the Swim fruit itself might have been a pink tomato, because as you may or may not know, Oda does like to go back and give Devil Fruits, when they are actually designed, properties of the character that has the ability. So in this case, it wouldn't surprise me that Senor Pink has a fruit that is both pink and looks like a tomato, because the tomato is the only fruit that we see him eating on screen, which then folds back into Frankie, because in Ennis Lobby, his hair did become a tomato-like shape. So with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Give me your thoughts and tell your friends about Polypede Waxy.